Theme park workers of Reddit. What unknown privileges do insanely wealthy people receive at your park? Worked at WDW also. Kids between 1-year-old and 16-year-old with wealthy parents would sometimes rent out entire theme parks. One time, Hollywood Studios was rented out to a kid who was, I believe, turning 8. Most of the rides stayed open and multiple bars serving alcohol would be set up for the grown-ups. Full-service bars scattered throughout the park. We'd keep the park open a few hours after closing for them to ride the rides privately and get wasted. No idea how much it'd cost to do something like that, but it happened quite often. Sometimes the families were the coolest and would have fun. Other times they'd be snobs and act younger than the kid having the birthday. For the families who were fun, the employees were usually a lot more relaxed, due to no crowds, and would have fun with them too. In some cases, the group would be on one side of the park and we'd be sending empty ride vehicles around just waiting for them to show up. We knew they'd be about an hour before they'd reach us, so we'd trade rides. So while we operate our ride, operators of another attraction would come ride. Maybe the lights get turned on for things like Rockin' Roller Coaster. Maybe all the lights get turned off and we'd ride it in pitch black. Was a lot of fun to do that. To share another story, celebrities would often come by and it was always interesting. Some were the greatest people ever, some were the absolute worst. To name a few that I felt were the worst was Taylor Swift and Amanda Bynes, mainly because they were very stuck up and rude to employees and guests alike. Taylor Swift had asked that no guests be in the queue area at the loading dock for a ride as she did not want to be seen by guests. Then her group would ride multiple times, all while we have to hold the line, which was already a 120 minutes wait for guests until they were done. But the nicest of celebrities made it worthwhile. The Harlem Globetrotters visited us during the ESPN weekend and arrived at the ride I was working at just as it had broken down. Guests were bummed that one of the most popular attractions had broken down, so the Globetrotters started playing with the guests by doing basketball tricks and played on the hula hoop with the kids, which is pretty funny watching extremely tall guys doing a hula hoop with little humans. Celine Dion and her husband visited our attraction, but didn't want to ride. Renee did the ride while Celine hung out with us in the break room. She was fascinated by the vending machine that had a glass plastic pane showing a moving motor to grab the drink and dispense it on the right, just so she could watch this vending machine. She'd ask each of us our order, then buy us a drink and watch in awe as it would grab the soda and dispense it. Some of the celebrities were downright rude, whereas others are just great to talk to when you're not asking for photographs or autographs. Almost like they were normal people or something. I worked at Six Flags. As most people know, theme parks have different tiers of tickets you can buy, which entitle the customers, or guests as we called them, to certain privileges. That is, base ticket for entry is $45. Early admission base season pass $60. What a lot of people don't know is that we had a tier of ticket that started at $500 that gives you a corporate escort that will allow you to cut in at any line at the park 2, unlimited food and drink 3, unlimited rides without needing to exit for another guest first 4, a private air-conditioned lounge area where you can rest, $500 day for unlimited food. I'd make it my mission to break even just on food. Pretty sure I could easily eat $50 worth of food per hour at Six Flags, especially if you stuff yourself and head for the most extreme rides immediately after. That should allow you to reload at the restaurant and repeat, ad nauseam. I work at Universal Orlando. One Direction once bought out the park at night after one of the concerts they had, stayed really late and spent most of their time in the newly opened, at the time, Diagon Alley. They didn't even come to my section of the park, but I got paid, so there's that. A lot of celebrities that come around will either just walk through normally and we're required to act like we don't know who they are, and some buy the super VIP that lets them basically do and go wherever they like. That last option also gives you a personal tour guide. It's like $3,000 a person or some ridiculous number like that. Worked in WDW. Celebrities get guided access to and through the Utilita tunnel system beneath Magic Kingdom if they wanted to get to different parts of the parks the fastest. They mainly only go to the nicer parts though, like the clean and pristine sections under Fantasyland and Main Street. Not the gross ones where most of us worked, lol, though Johnny Depp ends up in the nasty parts of Adventureland to gain access to the elevators that get you up to Pirates. Funnish story. Sorta relevant. Mariah Carey was a person we were all told to avoid at all costs. For our own sake. At least in my land. We were told that if we saw an entourage coming that even kinda looked like she'd be in it to just turn or duck away because she was such a misery. I never ran into her while she visited with her husband and kids, but found it interesting that her behavior was so egregious that our leaders went out of their way to warn us about her. I worked security at a theme park that hosted Cody Simpson for a concert. Apparently he's the Australian Justin Bieber, a title I'm sure he loves. Anyway, somewhat famous I suppose. After the concert, he and his entourage got escorted around the park by several of the security staff and I, while surrounded by several of his own private, large security guys. When he saw a ride he wanted to ride, we walked him up the exit stairs and he got the ride. Not a huge perk. I realize. It was probably pretty nice to bypass every line, while being paid a handsome fee for being there. Most themes parks are also available to buy out for the day. Usually that was just companies having an annual event, but when they only bought a partial day, the park closed early and all the regular guests, anyone without an armband usually, were booted out. I wish I knew what that cost, but it's probably pretty expensive considering the hundreds of employees and utilities it must take to run a theme park. Money talks at theme parks. If you have lots, you can pretty much do what you want, ride what you want whenever you want. No different than real life, I imagine. Worked in WDW. First in resorts and then in the parks. The only major difference I witnessed at the resort was when we set up a late check-in, 11 PM, and cleared the lobby for it. It wasn't even that big of a deal because there were only a couple of people hanging around that late and the store QSR was closing down for the night anyway. In the parks, it differs by who the VIP is and what they decide. Some just go to the park like anyone else, cause a little bit of a stir when recognized, but otherwise just spend their day like anyone else. Some do the Keys to the Kingdom tour, like someone else already mentioned, but it's pretty standard and pretty much anyone can do it if they want to pay for it. And then there are the guided tours, where you have someone from guest services with you all day and you line jump and get priority seating, etc. But again, pretty much anyone can do it if they can pay for it. Disney will typically bend over backwards to support any reasonable requests. I know they've cleared restaurants at celebrity requests before, but all in all, during my time there, it was all pretty low-key. Big UK theme park based on bricks. Most celebs get the usual best line skipping products, free stuff, backstage tours. However, we also had someone visit who was royalty from a very oil-rich country, so money no object type deal. The team I worked in had to run around with radios ahead of his family plus 20 strong entourage, trying not to be seen, to predict his movements. When they arrived at a ride, we'd clear out the exit line of plebeians, and let them all waltz in and go straight on. Rumor were, for this service, was a 5-figure sum. They didn't want to speak to or even be near staff, so everything went through their minders. That's all the antics I was involved in, but I'm sure there was more as they all stayed in the hotel on site. I worked at Busch Gardens back in the 90s. During that time we had celebrities like Garth Brooks, WWE wrestlers and their families, and Hanson. Shut up. It was the 90s. Visit while I worked there. I found the treatment depended on the celebrity in question. Garth Brooks and his band, along with families, were all pretty low-key, though they were escorted through the park by an employee, and allowed to travel from point to point using employee walkways. They didn't really ask for much. They rode rides and they were all very friendly. The WWE guys were the most low-key and the most fun. They didn't ask for escorts. They roamed around on their own and just had a blast. They were fun to interact with. I wasn't a wrestling fan, so I didn't know any of them by name, but they were huge guys and all stood out in the crowd. They were hard to miss. As for Hanson, well, most of us never even saw them. From what I understand, if they wanted to ride something, the ride was cleared of other guests while they rode. They were taken around behind the scenes everywhere they went, and we were told not to try to interact with them unless they started a conversation. Edit. I should point out that I only bring up celebrities because non-famous rich people don't stand out. All the regular wealthy just blend in. Second edit. While at Busch Gardens I did see Governor Rick Scott once. I was there just as a guest that time. For good reason, he doesn't travel light. I work at Universal Orlando and have been for a few years now. We have two different types of VIP tours. Ones that are non-private. You share the tour with another group or two. That start at around $300 minus park admission. And then private tours. Just your party. That start at around $2,500. The latter group is usually celebrities. Or families that don't want to deal with crowds or waiting in line. They get taken through VIP staircases. If they're celebrities, they'll travel backstage to avoid crowds. They won't use public restrooms, but rather our employee restrooms. They get special meals, free photos, and a ton of other stuff. They are generally some of the most pleasant people I deal with throughout the day. Can't say anything for the celebrities because I don't talk to them. Most are excited to be on the tour and love skipping the lines and the private tour they get all day. If a company wants to rent out the park, they can, with a fee. We've had some major companies rent it out for a night. Microsoft last month. And they get all the rides, merchandise, catering, open bars, all to themselves. Money talks, my friends.